Think beauty lighting is simple? Join me in this photo deconstruction because we're going with advanced lighting. 6 lights, 4 gels, 3 optical spots. Hey everybody, Lindsay Adler here. There's a lot of tutorials out there that focus on simple lighting, but sometimes there's a creative effect or a certain amount of impact where to achieve it, the lighting's not simple at all. And don't get me wrong, I have tutorials on how to make beautiful images with one light. I have one light artistry, I have guides, but sometimes the setup calls for 3 or 4 or 5, or in this case, 6 different lights. So in this photo deconstruction, I'm going to break down what each light is contributing to the shot, and then I'm going to show you what I got out of camera versus what was achieved in post-processing. Now, before we dive into this, I wanted to let you know that I have a variety of hands-on workshops. In these intensives, I invite you into my studio and I show you different advanced techniques like this. In fact, I have an intensive on advanced lighting. I have one on avant-garde beauty. I have beauty throughout the ages. I have fashion, you name it. So if you would like to join me in person, not only to take beautiful photos like the ones you see here, but also to learn from me in person, be sure to check out the links in the description below for a lot more details. So let's begin with the concept of this image. Periodically, I do creative play days. And on these days, there's no boss, there's no one in charge. It's just me and my creative team making beautiful images. And typically in a shot, we're all contributing, but often one person takes the lead. In other words, is this a hair shot? Is this a makeup shot? Like what are we focusing on in this image? And so for this shot, I allowed my hairstylist, Lynn, to lead the way. He wanted to do something that looked kind of like a finger wave covered in gemstones. And he did this pretty quickly. It was actually the very end of the day. And so I wanted to be able to showcase the gemstones and create an image that channeled the mood that he was trying to achieve. So typically what will happen is on a big commercial production, we plan out every detail. We know what the hair is going to look like. We know what the makeup's going to look like, the wardrobe, the lighting. But on our creative days, sometimes it evolves. We allow ourselves to be spontaneous, and sometimes that lets us come up with something much more creative than if we'd planned out everything ahead. So let's actually take a look at the lighting and how I got such dramatic sculpted light here. So first of all, I took this behind the scenes at the end of the day because I looked at it and I go, wait, how many lights? How complex did we go? I got to get it behind the scenes so I could show everybody. So this is what our set looked like. Now, when we're on set, what we often do is we usually start with 4 to 5 lights on a creative shoot day because then we have everything set up. So, for example, we'll often have a main light, a fill light, a background light, and 2 rim lights because from there, we can turn on or off what we need or don't need. Obviously, not every shot needs 5 lights or 6 lights. Often, it only needs 1 or 2, but we like to have it set up so we can move and pivot quickly. What that also means is sometimes there might be a light in the scene that we're not even using or a tool. So for example, in this shot, you see that I have a silver reflector. Originally, I had that because we had a different modifier on our main light. We were using it to bounce some fill, but I didn't end up using it here. So just to give you the idea of kind of organically how we work, we've got that main, fill, background, 2 rims. We move things in and out. But for this setup, we ended up with very precise lighting. So let's take a look by beginning with our main light. All right, so there's a lot going on in this image. So when I talk about the main light, it's the one over here to the right-hand side, and on it is an optical spot with a kit lens. Now, the kit lens is the 150 millimeter, and it allows you to have tighter areas of illumination. This is the main light in our scene. And what I was doing is opening and closing the shutters. There's these little doors that you can open and close to create this kind of pocket of light on the face. What we actually did, if you look at the end shot, you see how the light's a little bit irregular? We actually moved some of the shutters, some of the leaves around so that it made an irregular pattern. I could have put in a go-between. They have these dappled light shape, but we ended up just creating a pocket of light based on what's in the modifier itself. So that is our first light on her face. It is a hard light. It is a very concentrated and precise light. So if you start with that, then she'd just kind of be a floating head of hard light here. So we need to do things to start carving her out from the background or adding more detail to her face. So let's actually go to the fill light. The fill light is over here just in the top right-hand corner, and it is a bare strobe. There's nothing on it, and on it is a cyan gel. Now, the reason I did this is if you pop over to the main shot again. So we've got that kind of dappley light on the face from the optical spot, and then everywhere that there was a shadow, you can see that there is a blue color. This is from that fill light, the bare head with the blue or cyan gel. Now, the reason for this, that we went with a hard modifier, is because we were working with so many gemstones. We wanted to be able to pick up some reflections off those gemstones. If I went with a light bounced off the ceiling or maybe an umbrella, it wouldn't have been as specular. So we purposely are using exclusively hard light modifiers throughout this entire setup. So we've got our main, the optical spot with the kit lens. Then we've got our fill, the blue fill on the subject's face. Okay, so far it would have the little dapply light on her face, all the blue fill. Let's do the background next. So the background paper we went with initially is a Savage Universal coral background, which is kind of like a desaturated light pink. We weren't sure where we were going to end up, but we figured because the gemstones in the hair were pink, we would likely play with a pink, purple, and blue color palette. So we put that up initially just to give us something to work with. So the light that we are using on the background is right here behind the subject. It's on a floor stand, and it's just a bare head with a kind of a pinkish magenta gel. Now, the reason that we went with a pink gel is because we have that cyan fill light, right? That bare bulb that's hitting everywhere. The background was actually looking really bluish purple. And so even when we lit the lower part of the background pink, it wasn't saturated enough. So we added a pink gel to it just to make it pop a little bit more. So we've got optical spot, blue fill, pink on the background. And that would have been good. If you only had 3 lights, that would have been a decent way to illuminate this shot. But as you know, we ended up with 6. So what are those other 3 doing? All right, well, the next one is over here on the left-hand side. We have another optical spot with a kit lens. What we did for that was just light the hair light. We closed down the little shutters and we were just illuminating the hair, specifically so we could get even more pops, even more reflections off of that gemstone. We maybe could have used a grid, but since I do have multiple optical spots, it's really nice to be able to just go, okay, I want a little spotlight here, a little spotlight here, a little spotlight here. So that's why we chose that modifier. It doesn't mean there are other solutions, but if you've got them, use them. So we use that kit lens on our hair there. The next one that you can see, blue rim light. So that's the one right here. Just a bare head with a cyan gel, and we were just trying to get a wash of blue across her hair. All right, let's actually take a look at what the lighting is looking like in the final photo. All right, so you've got the dappled light on the face from the optical spot. You've got the blue filling in the shadows from that bare head with the blue gel. Then we have the background light with the pink, which is why you see that gradation of pink on the background. Then remember I said there was another optical spot for the hair? That's why you see these 2 bright reflections on the gemstones. There's the optical spot right there. And then from the back left-hand side, that bare head with the cyan blue gel, that's that color that is raking across here. So that pretty highlight that you see. So that gives us 5 strobes. So what's the 6th one? Honestly, the 6th one didn't end up doing that much. So, this is why I said I leave the lights in and then we turn them on or off. There's one more optical spot over here on the right-hand side. And we used it just to create a little bit more highlight and illumination on the hair in the right-hand side of the frame. But we had it pretty low power. We put it to pink, so it would just, you can kind of see it's a little bit more pink on that side of the frame. It was relatively subtle. So in the end, yeah, we have 6 different lights. You could do something good with 3. 4 would get you even closer to this, and 5 is what you really need for this effect. Before I take you over to what we got in camera versus what was achieved in post, let's talk about the camera I used. I was shooting with the Canon R5. This is my go-to camera, and the lens I was using was a 70-200 2.8. Now, very often, if you watch me shoot, I love the 24-105 2.8. That is the lens that I use most often. So why did I go for a longer focal length here? It's because I went for a tighter crop. You can see here that I am tighter than what I would typically get with a 105. If I went this close with a 105 and got closer to her, like physically, in order to achieve this crop, there would have been a little bit more distortion. In fact, the top of her head here, even with the 200, is looking slightly wide and distorted, and I didn't want to do that. So we switched over to the 70-200. I also chose f11 as my aperture because I wanted to be able to have everything nice and sharp and to emphasize some of the reflections off of the gemstones. Now, these gemstones weren't just created by my aperture. This sparkle is actually by using something called a Tiffin North Star filter, and it creates multiple points of reflection. Typically, I'll use one of the cheaper star filters, like a 4-point or a cross screen, but that only creates 4 points, hence the name, whereas a North Star is a little bit more intricate, and I thought it felt a little more theatrical, which matched this image for me. So we've talked about the lighting. You've seen a little bit of what I've done for in-camera effects with a star filter, but now let's take a look at what I captured in camera. The raw file is insanely flat and hazy like you see here. And the reason is because I had the star filter layered up on it. Whenever you use a star filter, it creates haze in your image. But this isn't what I was looking at in my shot. Because I was shooting tethered, I went in and right away added contrast and cooled down the image. So this is actually, as I'm shooting, what the images are looking like, which already is a lot moodier, a lot closer to what I was going for. In fact, I went into the color balance, which you could do this in Lightroom or Capture One, but I went into my little color wheels and I added some cyan to the highlights. And then I added a little bit of magenta to the shadows. So with the contrast, a little bit cooler white balance, cyan highlights and magenta shadows, it's already pretty close. But what you'll notice is there's quite a bit of texture on her face. And I don't mean it as like she has bad skin. It's nothing like that at all. But I'm using many hard lights all over the place. Hard main light, a hard fill, a hard light raking here and there. And so there's a bit of texture. Plus, when I went from that original image to bring my contrast back, I dragged contrast, so I added a bunch, and then a lot of clarity. When clarity adds contrast in the midtones, it also emphasizes skin texture. So the hard light, the clarity, everything was working against her. So the last part of the equation is retouching. So I did a few things. So you'll notice here, there's a lot of cleanup on the skin to make things smoother. I also have the hair filled in. There were some gaps in the hair. It was as the gemstone started to pull down, it started to droop a little bit. So we filled in some of those gaps. And I also decided the hair would look better pink. Her actual hair color is red, but I went in with a blank layer. I painted pink, and then I changed the blend mode to color. And then I did lower the hair a little bit under the forehead. I felt like the forehead was looking a little wide. And so you can see it is a lot of changes, but it's many small ones that add up to impact. So if you look at the original image, if you weren't doing any processing and you didn't realize how much you could perfect the skin in post, I don't think this is as romantic or alluring. If you were shooting this, you might not be as wowed. What I was seeing in camera, as I was shooting into Capture One was this, but what I was seeing in my head was this. So it's knowing what's possible in post in combination with the lighting, in combination with the concept. Like that's how you get to an impactful final image. And also, not to mention, like the model is certainly contributing here. One of the things I loved about her, I'd never worked with her before, is she was constantly giving me little micro expressions, a little raise of her eyebrow, a little gasp in her breath. Like it made a really big difference rather than her just giving me a pretty face staring at camera. So she did a great job. It's the whole team working together. So I used 6 different strobes, 4 different gels, 3 different optical spots. Would I have been able to create a similar image with fewer or less gear? I could create something that probably hit the notes of this image with 4 lights. But for me, if I'm not trying to simplify something to teach core concepts, I'm going to use however many lights and the right tools to help me achieve that effect. Now, this is definitely advanced lighting. So if you would like to learn more about this style of lighting, I have everything from beginner to advanced. So go to learnwithlindsay.com. For example, I have Creative Lighting 2. That is a guide that talks about everything from Fresnels to Mylar to lasers to multiple optical spots. If you want something simple, I have something like One Light Artistry that shows you how to craft beautiful lighting out of using a single strobe. And if you prefer in-person education, I have several intensive workshops where we cover this style of lighting. Plus, you get to shoot beautiful models like this. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this photo deconstruction. Now, if you want to see the gear used to make these images, be sure to check out the links in the description below, and of course, visit adorama.com. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and I encourage you to share with friends, because I am regularly creating videos like this one that gives you a peek inside my creative process. See you next time.